If you get most of your clients from referrals, you're building your business on sand. Now, I get it. Referrals are great. They're warm introductions. People have done the selling for you. They've recommended you. It feels fantastic. And it can give you the illusion that you've got what I call flow. In other words, a steady and reliable flow of leads coming your way, and you're converting them into clients. But it actually masks a really big problem. You don't actually have a means of acquiring new clients in your control. You are at the mercy of your past clients, your past contacts, remembering to drop your name. And when you think about it, whilst referrals are the easiest sales you can get, the easiest clients you can get, you have zero control over it. If referrals dry up, so does your business. You have to scramble and do crazy things to fill a gap. And let's be honest, it creates a yo-yo. So you end up with those kind of peaks and troughs. And I remember about 10 years ago, I was working with a client and they had a really good stream of referrals. And so they were constantly thinking, they had one eye on what if this dries up? They were a leadership development coach. And they constantly had one eye on what if this dries up? But it wasn't an eye big enough because they assumed that this would just keep going. And for 2 to 3 years, it did. And then they realized that some of their contacts were starting to retire. And so they were conscious that new management, new leadership, even some of their existing contracts could be in jeopardy. So they stepped it up a little bit more, but the leads kept coming. And so guess what? They still, despite that nervousness, kept thinking or kept moving along, not really building that controllable system. Then they reached a difficult point where actually their biggest contract, the person who they'd worked with for years, retired, and that contract was put on hold. And so now they're in a situation where their main contract went on hold and they were now hand to mouth. They had to eat what they kill in terms of what leads come in. They had to convert them to make money in front of them. There was no runway. The runway was gone. And this created a huge amount of stress. And for somebody, who wasn't a spring chicken, they weren't in the 20s, they were in their late 40s, the concept of all of this stress and emotional toll of having to go out to market in a hurry just wasn't pleasant. And at the same time, they were going through a divorce. So all of this kind of culminated in one moment. And then the client came back to me and said, Dean, we need to scramble and we need to scramble now. And it was like, I don't really want to be embroiled in trying to save somebody, literally save somebody from, catastrophic failure of their business. So I agreed to help them, but not for the fees I would charge because I didn't want the moral hazard. And he realized that he'd got to that point because he had assumed that the status quo would continue, the leads and the referrals would continue, but they don't. They eventually dry up. You have dry patches, you've run out of road. And so I always say to people, you should consider referrals as the bonus, not the strategy. Great to have, brilliant to have, top of the tree in terms of shows how good you are at what you do, that people are volunteering you to other people. But it's impossible to scale and build predictability because you have no idea when they're coming. And they only come from what's happened in the past. So you're not proactively moving forward, you're riding on past success. And that is dangerous in any market. Think of the film stars who, have had brilliant careers, but actually now they're just riding on that. Eventually that fizzles out. So it's not that you're, not equipped to market. It's not that you don't need to do it. And it's the most important thing I want to say here is it's not about doing something else equally as unpredictable to get results. Like posting content on social media is not a viable replacement for a referral-driven business. It's not reliable or predictable. But likewise, you don't have to be on the front foot and be all pitchy and salesy. What a system looks like is more than that. It's about controlling and creating your own demand. So think about it like a referral is somebody talking to somebody else, having a problem, and your contact who refers you is basically sowing the seeds to create that demand that they want to talk to you. You've got to do that for yourself, and it doesn't happen with a one-hit wonder or posting. You can't just DM people into oblivion and hope it all fixes itself. That's the tactics of the desperate, not somebody who's selling high value services, expertise, knowledge, wisdom, know-how. It's not how you do it. So you need that stability. And for many, when they're getting referrals, they've got existing clients and a flow of referrals, it all feels quite safe, but it really isn't. It's an illusion of safety. So you want to make your referrals the icing on the cake, not the cake. And a system is quite simple. It's about thinking about three parts. I've got to build awareness, I've got to build trust, and I've got to build conversion. You can't bypass that. When you're selling expertise, it really is about trust. So you can't bypass that. You need to build a system that builds the awareness. Yes, great. So posting content could be that, but you only got to take it one step deeper and build trust, that they see that you know what you're talking about and you're credible. And because they may have not known you before, there's nobody vouching for you when you're doing this on social media. These are all strangers. So build the awareness so you're not a complete stranger. Build the trust that they go, this person really does know what they're talking about. They understand the challenges I've got. And then have a way to get them to become a lead and convert that lead into a client, a lead to client system, a way to capture leads and take them down to a conversation and a sale. Without that system, you are in a very tricky position. So here's my quiz for you. Look back at some of the last clients you've won. What number of them came from referrals? Was it 10%, 20%, 50%, 100%? A healthy balance is to have 30% of your business coming from referrals. 70% is what you're generating with your marketing and sales effort. If you don't have that balance, you risk hitting a cliff edge at some point or hitting a wall somewhere where you have a gap. And that creates this yo-yo cycle. So think about a system that you need to go from lead to client. But before you get the leads, you have to build the awareness and the trust. If you don't do that, you have to really hard sell. And I would never recommend an expert trying to hard sell anybody, because it kind of undermines their value and kind of compromises their credibility. So you need a system. Referrals are great, but don't build your business on referrals, because it may cost you.